Good afternoon and welcome to Conversations on Showing Up for Kids. This is our Autism Acceptance and Mental Health Month awareness push, whatever we're going to call it this time. I'm director of the Southern Regional Center for Children and Youth with Special Healthcare Needs, and I can barely contain myself. I am so excited for today's conversation as we are going to be talking about what's not working for Black and Brown children around the area of autism. And so today we have the pleasure of talking with Brittany Neal. I will let her do any introductions that she would like to do for herself as I go ahead and try to figure out who all is in this room. So thank you all for being here. So Brittany, let's just start with, what's your experience with supporting individuals with autism and why this topic? Why does this topic matter?
Okay. So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brittany Neal. I am a psychotherapist at Anesis Therapy, a local agency in Madison, Wisconsin. I also side hustle of my own small business where I work with women and children transitioning from homelessness. And then before this work, I was doing a lot of work in housing and mental health case management, and also working with adults with developmental disability as well. And so to go back to your question of, can you repeat the question one more time for me?
Absolutely. Should have given you time to introduce yourself first before I just threw a question at you.
It's okay.
Shows you how excited I am, Brittany. No, so in all that, could you just explain a little bit more about your experience with in supporting individuals with autism? And we came up with this topic of what's not working for Black and Brown kids and autism diagnosis. Why is that important?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that why it's so important to me and the work that I do, because currently as a therapist, one of the main things that I'm hearing right now is many of the teens that I'm working with, I'm seeing a lot of high sensory needs and requests. And then when they get comfortable with me, they're starting to share more and more and more about their lived experience. And I'm like, oh, this seems like this might be something else going on, And so for me, that's why this is so important. And then I also have some adults who in their late 30s and 40s have later been diagnosed with autism, and just was feeling like things were different for them, and they just really didn't know how to navigate things or just know how to deal with anything. So for me, this is why this is so important for me. And then also as a parent myself, I also am like still fighting with this with my daughter of trying to figure out what her experience is, and finally got an appointment after being on a wait list for so long and plenty of people just telling me, oh, it might not be this, and years in occupational therapy and other things, and saying that it's ADHD, and ADHD increase in her OCD behaviors, which is more of a negative sign. And so for me, with my personal experience and my work experience, it really just made me like even more passionate about trying to get early diagnosis and reducing the barriers.
Well, and Brittany, there has been this push for years for early diagnosis and an understanding that earlier, being able to intervene earlier in children's lives can show a difference. I mean, we're never lost causes. People are amazingly resilient, and it's never too late because we're made beautifully here. But there's been all this talk about the importance of early diagnosis and getting it right so the therapies could get right, so the families could be supported. Why are Black and Brown kids being misdiagnosed or being diagnosed later in adulthood? What's going on?
Yeah, so some of the things that, at least from my personal experience and also the research that I've done just in this area, one of the big things, I'll start with the systematic from that grand span of systems of how we like decide to diagnose and things like that. And if you're coming from a lens of where research is primarily done on Caucasian kids who have access and opportunity to participate and also trust in the system to participate in those things, the research will kind of look that way. So when someone walks into a room, for an example, and they don't necessarily have the language to describe what they're feeling, and it's like, oh, I just see anxiety because this person is taking notes and they don't look like me. And so you're going to see like the anxiety that I'm feeling about being in this new space with this new person. And if I'm able to make contact here and there, right? That looks right away, feels like, oh, well, they're making eye contact, especially if it's like a fresh graduate from school, or at times with the high needs, just a resident passing through. And if you're not hitting some of those markers right away, it's like, oh, well, I don't see it, right? And then some of the other things like stigma in the community around having developmental disabilities or having a mental health diagnosis. That's just everywhere. But then also within the Black community, as a Black woman, I don't speak for the Black community as a whole, but that's something that's at large. We're not always talking about those things, and we may go talk to a more trusted person. I think about being one of the first therapists in my family. I'm calling it out into the universe that we're going to have more. And how many of my old childhood friends or cousins have reached out to me to say, ask me questions here and there about little small things, because they're curious, they want to learn, but they don't have a trusted person to speak to. And so how information is delivered is really important. And so when we're thinking about reaching new communities, we can't just go this traditional route to say, let's make a flyer, let's go reach out to these spaces. You have to go and be willing to go meet people where they're at. That empathy is really important when you're wanting to meet people. So if I think about, at least in the Madison area, churches are really big where they disseminate a lot of great information to a lot of different people. And even if someone doesn't go to church or has a different faith or practice spirituality, like someone knows someone that can pass along that information. But willing that connection is so important. And so misconceptions about behaviors is huge.
Can you talk a little bit more about that misconception of behavior? Because I know that a lot of people have they get this picture of what autism looks like. And then they get a picture of whatever this is what ADHD looks like, because we fill in the gaps based on our own experiences. And so I could see where you're saying part of that leads to that misdiagnosis, but talk a little bit more about that misunderstanding of behavior.
Yeah. And so oftentimes where a child may have really high sensory needs, right? And the input from the world is too much. And so if their body is feeling imbalanced inside and they're just wiggling around, touching everything, and they're like, you need to sit down. You sit down, and now you're correcting their behavior constantly. And then it's like, maybe they might respond, maybe they won't respond, right? But then the report is, wants to still keep getting out of their seat. If they have any, I think about when someone is really have a sensitivity to sound. And this was a really good example for my daughter, where she couldn't go to the bathroom with other kids and hear the flushes over and over and over again. So she would run away. Now she looked like she's being disruptive, and the teacher's running down the hall to go find her because she went and hid, and then they couldn't find her for 20 minutes. Right.
She wasn't being defiant. She
Mhm.
was having some sensory overload and needing to take care of herself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
Interesting.
so where a behavior might be seen as disruptive, this is where biases can come in at. And we all have biases as human beings. We all do. But biases come in for the Black and brown children, where instead of something being more open to like, oh, these behaviors, let's explore this, right? Is you're being disruptive, or you're using words like they were aggressive. They became very aggressive when I tried to grab onto them, right? And what universe do we grab onto just anyone who's upset? And so
None that's helpful to people.
no, we don't do it. We usually give people their space to try to calm down, especially when we're adults. We recognize that, oh, that person needs to calm down. We don't keep crowding to that person. But with kids, we do that.
We push. And somehow by the sheer volume of our voice or the sound of our voice, they will suddenly hear us, and it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. And so instead of being diagnosed with, let's explore the possibility of sensory processing disorder or autism. Oh, this is looking more like defiant disorder.
Mm-hmm. And
Or
so do you see a lot of like the young Black kids who might be diagnosed with autism? They're getting diagnosed more with behavioral health disorders?
Yes. So I will see oftentimes where they'll be like, oh, well, they were having trouble in daycare, where kids are getting suspended or kicked out of daycares now, which is crazy. But as young as that, instead of finding the right resources for parents or connecting with doing a holistic approach, because you can't just give treatment to a kid without giving it to the source, which is their parent, their home. And so oftentimes seeing those kids, and I usually will see them right around like between 6 and the age of 10, where it's like on the track of being suspended from school all the time. And then I do have quite a few more teens that I work with from those teenage years, where it's like, oh, now they're in a juvenile detention or inpatient.
Yeah.
But then the mental health aspect of things is standing out more.
And we know that's a problem with the system, is that our kids get put onto a track based on their diagnosis. And then that seems to open up just a certain amount of resources, or if it opens up any sort of resources. And if that child has been misdiagnosed, it's possible that the interventions aren't helping them. And so they're not going to get better until someone comes and says, well, maybe it's this. And maybe it's autism, because then you have a whole new set of tools that you could use to help that child. So the longer they are misdiagnosed, the worse it is for that child, so to speak.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. It makes me think about just the power of language, and like sometimes having a provider who understands where you're coming from and understands the language that you speak. Like we all speak in English, right? But I can have someone come in my office and be like, girl, like, and just say whatever they need to say, and then I can like understand it, right? But if they go somewhere else, like that other provider might not understand what they're trying to say, right?
Right.
And so that just the process of not having, I mean, what we call that is code switching, like the process of not having to code switch. And for folks, code switching is where like folks in like the Black and brown community feel like they have to change how they speak or present in front of someone who is white.
Mhm.
And so that process of having to code switch in a doctor's office and not actually having medical terms to describe what you're feeling inside. So you may be feeling something, but you don't have the language to describe it. So now the doctor is just picking up on the ancientness of trying to figure out what you're trying to say. And then another misdiagnosis there.
And it, oh my gosh, I mean, Brittany, that just strikes me as this whole, and we talk about systemic racism and we talk about, you know, trying to get people to the starting line. But there's been this whole language developed around autism and mental health that, for the most part, was developed without Black and brown people involved in it.
Yeah.
And so now we're using terms that are comfortable for one culture, that are part of the academia, that are part of the diagnosis, that are part of the treatment. That may not be the words that the other cultures are using. And so you end up with this diagnostic misconnect and therapy misconnect. So I know that you had mentioned that your daughter is now off the wait list and is going to be seen, which is fantastic. But what are, and you mentioned churches, but what are some other common methods that the Black and brown community will access these services? Because we know that they've been set up in a certain way to serve a certain amount of people. And then we get flummoxed when everybody doesn't come through our doors. Oh my gosh, I mean, we're here and we want to help people, but we're not seeing all the people that we want to help. So how do people access these services?
It's trust. It's a trust system. So if I like meet someone and we're talking with each other, we're engaged, and you like, even if I randomly met this woman at Walgreens at the Black Women's Wellness, and we've been friends ever since, and that was about almost 5 years ago. But it was just like the connection, just the love that she shared, the appreciation for me. And so it's a trust thing where someone's like, oh, I know someone, right? And then when that person says, hey, I'm not going to refer you to just anyone, right? That continues to build up that trust. And so for me, it's about building up trust within the communities again. And
that takes time.
That does take time. I mean, we didn't get here overnight either, right?
No.
And so I think that's one of the things that sometimes we want to rush the process of what trust looks like, but it's so many systems of oppression that people have experienced and continue to experience that you can't just say, well, I did my part and expect someone to say, okay, here I go. Here's my arms open. I want to give you love. Give me love. That you have to give time for healing. And healing journeys look different for everybody. And you have to give moments for when someone becomes triggered and not say, oh, that person was withdrawn, and analyze every single thing that person is doing. Sometimes as clinicians, we don't have to take it that far. This person was a little more quieter today. I wonder what's wrong. Let's walk with curiosity. But a lot of it's about trust. And so like churches, community centers, connecting with other local people who's doing the work, of course, paying them for the work that they're doing, right? But and paying them for their time and showing appreciation for the value that they bring to the community in the relationship that they're going to bring to you. So there's people out there doing the work, right? creating these connections, and now like bigger agencies and white agencies also have to do the same too. But genuinely, like, don't just do it because you want to bring the numbers in, like genuinely do it because you care.
Which again, may be that you're not able to do it so I work for the university, and we're known to have these grants, and we're known for these time things. And it's like, you're always rushing to get something done. And it strikes me that relationships and building trust are not going to happen on a weekly, monthly time frame. It's going to depend on the quality of interaction, the number of times you're interacting, the posture that you bring into the space, and the chances that you step back and just let people be. And we're not really good at that. We're good at filling silence and wanting to move things along and setting up our goals and getting to our deliverables. And people don't work that way. And it's sometimes a conflict when going in and working with other cultures, when you're coming from this place of deliverable and numbers and all this stuff. And what I'm hearing is, yeah, go ahead, you do all that stuff, but it's not going to help. It's not going to bring things along. It's not going to build trust. And we need to find those ways to build that trust.
Yeah, no, you definitely have to find ways to build the trust and like incorporate people into your research. Like, part of being a research team doesn't require all of these degrees and all these other things that people think it does. And like, you have to work under someone, but have these extra trainings, which you can get, but like people inviting more people into it and not just being participants, but actually bringing other people into it makes a difference.
All right, well, I'm about done monopolizing your time because I want to open it up to other people for questions. You could feel free, go ahead and start putting your questions in the chat if you would like, or unmute and I'll call on you so we keep some semblance of order with the 20 of you. But Brittany, we talked about how the current setup for go over there, get a diagnosis isn't necessarily working because of the misdiagnosis, because of the wait list, because of not being able to access the services because they're not accessible. So what are some tips that you would have for parents and community members about what we can do?
I think at least as a tip from me as a parent, I did not stop, but I also practice self-care a lot because it's a exhausting road and you will get tired. So like building up from an aspect of self-care, you have to build up your support team first. Your small circle of trusted folks. And the more you continue to build up your circle, so when you get tired, you can jump right in, right? One of the other things is utilize the resources you can tap into. So if they say like, little Johnny got anxiety, CCS, the Community Comprehensive Services Program, can help you get a case manager and a therapist a little bit quicker than going through your insurance. And so if you go through there and then you speak with your therapist, advocating with your therapist and your case manager to say, I think my child might be dealing with something else besides anxiety, that's a step in the door. And then now you got 2 more people who are working to help navigate resources for you. And so sometimes it helps just to get a foot in the door to get to the next step.
I love that concept. I'm reminded of what Lola Dada Ali talks about when she does the Not Your Mama's Autism podcast. And she talks about the people that she gets in her life that are hope brokers, that are on her side, working with her from that positive, that hope of we will do something, we will change something, and the importance of having those hope brokers in your life is important. So we do have a question, thinking about providers. How can providers start to build trust with people?
I think one of the things is mental health work, working with folks with developmental, that work can be really exhausting for the individual. We have to recognize that. And the more we give time for just fun, like experience fun. I don't know, I do therapy, and it's been folks that have come in my office and does not want to talk, but they just enjoy the space. And I just like will laugh and giggle with them, and we will color together. Some adults I color with, like, it's just about creating an experience. And I know sometimes as providers, we like, okay, what did we just do here? How can I document this? Because insurance companies make it difficult for us. So on that piece of things, right, I engaged in building rapport and trust, right? And this is the way I did it. And I asked a couple open-ended questions. That's motivational interviewing for providers, but sometimes it's just the simple work of play and just having talk. Always being as engaging as you can. Like, people want to be seen and heard, and parents want to be seen and heard. Even if we're like busy, we don't know people's backstory or why they might be guarded. So just continue to be seen and let that parent be seen and heard. When you build up more trust with the parent and the child is observing that, that helps children help, oh, my mom trusts that person now. But if my mom don't trust you that much, or my mom is a little guarded around you, I'm gonna be even more guarded around you, because I love my mom and my mom takes care of me. Or not just mom, dads too. I represent for dads as well too. So trust really starts with just that genuineness and just allowing yourself to like let go of like that piece of like constantly having to do things. And it just takes time. I've worked with somebody for 4 years, and this person I'm still working with, and they're really just starting to open up now.
So it sounds like a lot of it is taking the time to learn about the person. I think you mentioned that curiosity a little earlier, and being
Yeah.
curious about this person and who they are and what they want and what's driving them. Not so much about fixing them, but listening to them.
Yeah, and I think from like a system, I know sometimes we work as providers in places where is a lot of restriction. And that's where that advocacy happens at, where you're pushing people to say, can you, we need, this is the way we normally do this, this is not gonna work for this family. We need to take a different approach. I need to take a different approach, which means you need to give me a different type of support from your supervisors. And so sometimes that advocacy that goes up to a higher level of the macro level of trying to change like the internal systems, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's, I'm struck with somebody who was just like, okay, Tim, because I've been trying to work on outreach, and people are just like, yep, that's wonderful, build those relationships. But you also have to make sure that the people that you're relying on behind you that are going to provide that support for somebody, that the system you are introducing them to is honoring to them as well. And so there's this internal work to be done, as well as then that external community work to be done. And you need both to be able to get to where you want to go.
Yeah.
Do you have any other tips for supporters, for providers that want to support people within the Black and Brown community around autism or mental health?
I think knowing the community more is another tip that's really important. And so, like, I think one of the other things about the Black and Brown community is like, someone's like, I have a referral for you, here you go. And then you call and you get someone who is not that friendly. And those warm handoffs are so important, or just doing that warm handoff for that person that you're supporting. It makes a difference because they're not walking that short path alone, even if it's just an email introduction and it's a chat through email to make sure that meeting is scheduled and finalized with that follow-up or something like that. Like those make a huge difference for people to have that. Because believe it or not, you know, power and control exist in every role. And voila, like sometimes the ball gets dropped. And sometimes having a provider behind you when that mom or that parent or that guardian, that caregiver walks in the door, it gives them, like other providers, a little extra push a little bit. So
I like that. Other questions, comments, join the conversation would be wonderful. We would love to have, so we do have a comment about how that's really true. The warm handoffs really seem to matter. And we have a hand raised by Aaron. Aaron, if you want to go ahead.
You know, so I'm a social worker at the Wiseman Center and the keeper of the wait list. So I'm a little hesitant to say that out loud. The thing that I'm thinking about though, as you're talking, Brittany, is we have such this push on early intervention and early identification. And it's almost like in some ways, what I want to think about for our clinic is how do we make sure that we're getting the word out to the right folks? Because are we perpetuating more just little white boys getting diagnosed, because those are the ones whose parents know how to talk to the provider? And how are we talking with childcare, and how are we talking with providers and really identifying all of the children who need that early diagnosis? But I there's this part of me that as you're talking, I'm like, are we making this worse with our focus on early identification? And not that that's not important, but then you get to a place where families, Black and brown families, are struggling more, and then they're hit with a 3-4 year wait list, where if we could have done some outreach on the front end, like we would have been seeing their 2-year-old in 6 months. So I don't have a question in there. I'm just having a whole thought here. So.
Yeah, I got you. I got you. What made me think? So at my full-time place, at Anesis Therapy, one of the things we use a lot of creativity with creating communities. So we have like satellite places. We have drop-in places where you can do just drop-in care. We're creating more ways to make things more accessible for people. So we have a drop-in place that's located at Mount Zion Church, and then we have one at Lighthouse Church, which really covers within like the Hispanic community. And so like we have like very intentional spots where we're at. And then it's just like as things continue to grow, as the needs continue to grow, we're doing a part of my new role is I do some learning and development. So I'm doing ways to do more educational spots where we're getting requests to be there. So I hear what you're saying, and just like it feels like not enough, but
right. Like I'm just thinking like all right, like how do we get providers to stop talking about little children as being bad and naughty because they're having a hard time, and how do we help parents who unfortunately are going to have to lead the way, right, in fighting with the provider and be like, all right, here are the words to say to your doctor, right? And if the doctor says this, then you argue this, how do we help broker on both ends of like, stop just labeling this child as bad, and how do we then also give parents kind of like what's the secret code to actually get the referral?
Yeah. So I feel like Aaron, your question, and then I see the other question. I'm wondering if the same thing, Aaron, how can we make services more accessible for Black and brown communities? And so, and then the drop-in care. So I'm going to kind of wrap it all in one. So
And
one
then
of the things.
before you start, Brittany, I just want to
Oh.
say, Denisha, we will get to you in just a moment. I see
Oh,
your
I'm
hand
so
raised.
sorry.
So no, go ahead and answer this thought about accessibility, but then we will get to Denisha.
So just around accessibility, it's like you have to think outside the box and insert yourself in spaces. And one of the ways you have to do that is if at the planning table that if you don't have folks that's in the community at your planning table, it's already going to not be ready for the community. If you're planning something for the community, but you have no one from the community there, that becomes a big issue. And so you have to really insert yourself to go and find folks to be at the tables when it comes to planning and organizing things. And there's a lot of amazing people. And so I don't out there in the community doing a lot of great work already. And so, I'm just gonna say this out loud because we sometimes in Madison can really hear some of the same names. Start with those names, but ask them who else do they know and find that person and bring them to the table and bring that creativity there. And so,
can you talk a little bit about, expand a little bit on that drop-in site before we get to Denisha?
Yeah. So Anesis holds drop-in sites at Mount Zion's Church, I think twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays between 1 and 4. And then at I am blanking on, I said the name earlier and now my brain is like, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
I hear you, and you'd think that I'd be listening really, really closely and could help you out, Brittany, but I can't. Was it not Fountain of Life?
No, it's a
Lighthouse.
Lighthouse, yes. Located at Lighthouse twice a week, where they do drop-in care for everyone. And so you have to be over 18, but if someone under 18 comes, you have to come with your parent and guardian to sign off on everything. Oh, someone put Lighthouse, thank you. And
people
so
are listening, yay.
Yeah, and so we have a case manager. We always have a case manager there. And then we have a few therapists there on site that come in support. So some of the case managers might be doing some immediate needs, and then therapists can do drop in. And usually they have it capped at 4, but if it's not busy, they don't turn anyone away, if that makes sense.
People find out more information at Anesis Therapy. Do you have more information then on the Anesis website about the drop-in sites too?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right, Denisha, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thanks. So I work for the Family Resource Center as a parent educator, but I'm also the parent of some very neurodivergent children. So I'm blessed to be in a place where the doctors have listened to me and I haven't had to do a lot of code switching when it comes to my kids. But reaching families through my work, especially Black and Brown families, the Black families that don't trust doctors or are still in the mentality of therapy is for white people. And then we don't have any Black therapists around here. So I'm grateful for the telehealth kind of a thing, but when it comes to these neurodivergent, autism diagnoses, if I can't help people help them trust and take the first couple steps of seeing a doctor or a therapist here, but I might be able to help them with connecting with a Black therapist, is that even going to work, doing it over telehealth or phone calls kind of a thing?
Okay. I think with kids, telehealth is a little bit harder. I think it depends on the therapist, to be honest. It really depends on the therapist and how engaging the therapist is. And so I think on like your end, when you're searching for someone, finding someone who can be more engaging online is important. Using creativity. Therapy doesn't always look like therapy. And I think the more, at least I practice that, and many of my coworkers here practice that therapy does not look like the typical therapy that movies show. And so I think it will, and sometimes it's just a door opener. Sometimes what I've learned in my short years of therapy as a therapist is that we're sometimes just a foot in the door. And so if I can help someone have somewhat of a positive experience, that's breaking down a layer of barrier for their next interaction with someone.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
I love that too. And I love this whole conversation, but somebody's got to bring it to a close. And unfortunately, I believe that's me. So I want to thank everyone so much. And of course, there is an evaluation to see how we're doing. And of course, I forgot to bring it up because that's just the way it goes someday. So I'll send that all to you along with when the recording is done. But Brittany, thank you so much for your work, for your insights. I am so looking forward to talking more about how to build trust in communities. This is an important conversation to keep having. We can't keep letting people be left behind. It's just not okay. We need to get everybody together. So thank you so much for being part of that, building the trust.
Yeah.
And we will, if you didn't know, tonight we will be talking about autism and suicide, and there's just a whole series. So just check out Autism Acceptance Month work. But Brittany, again, thank you so much. Hope you have a great rest of the afternoon, and I can't wait to talk to you again. Take care.